The Panasonic ETX2MM70 MFN power supply component repair kit includes all the necessary components to repair common failures on the main power supply board. Symptoms include if you have no power and if you have 2 or 10 blinks on the front light. After I've removed the power board from the panel, I will start removing components. The first piece that I will remove is a heatsink. I am starting by desoldering these points on the bottom side of the board. I will use my desolder gun to heat up the solder, and then the vacuum in the desolder gun sucks up the excess solder. You could also use a solder sucker or solder iron and wick. Some of the solder points may be difficult to reach. Use caution to not damage the board, and if needed, you can remove other heat sinks to gain access to the solder points. I have flipped the board over and will now pull out the heatsink. Again, I will use my desolder gun to release the smaller satellite boards from the power supply. Those boards are green and we have highlighted them with a red circle. After I have desoldered the satellite board, I can reach under the power supply and free that satellite board. I will repeat the same process on the other satellite board. We do not show it in the video, but after desoldering the satellite board, I will gently pull it loose from the power supply. I will need to remove this heatsink from the board so that I can access the solder points underneath it. I will flip the board over and desolder the heatsink by desoldering these solder points on the top side. I can wiggle the heatsink to loosen it from the board. Next, I will desolder the fuse solder points on the bottom side of the board. Then remove the fuse from the board. Next, I will use my solder iron and solder wick to clean up the pads on the board and remove the excess solder. I hold the wick on the pad and then apply pressure and heat with the iron to the wick. I will clip the wick as I use it to get a fresh piece every so often. After I have cleaned up the pads, I will put the fuse on the top side of the board and push the legs through the proper holes. Then I can solder the legs to the board using my iron and solder. Be sure to clip the legs close to the board. Next, I will solder the large heatsink back to the board. When replacing transistors, you will want to bend the pins to match the transistor you are removing. This is important because it allows the transistor to fit through the board properly. To remove the transistor, use a screwdriver to unscrew it from the heatsink. Then you can screw the replacement transistor in the same spot while pointing it in the same direction as the original. After that, you can put the heatsink back on the front side of the board and slide it through the holes. I will solder the heatsink on the bottom side of the board. Again, be sure to clip the legs after you are done soldering. Next, I will use my desolder gun to clean the points of the satellite board. I will place my tweezers onto the capacitor on the satellite board and use my heat gun to loosen it from the board. After it has loosened, I will lift it from the board with my tweezers. Since the heat gun melted part of the mat on my desk, I will place the satellite board onto a heat sink on the board. I'm using the heat sink as the platform because it is metal and will not melt. Normally I would use my preheater, but not everyone will have a preheater. When removing the IC from the satellite board, I will place my tweezers on the legs of the IC and then use my heat gun to heat up the component. After the IC has been loosened from the board, I will pull it off with my tweezers. Then I will use my solder wick and iron to clean up the pads. Next, I will apply some solder paste onto the pads for the capacitor. I will use my tweezers to hold the capacitor in place while I apply heat with my heat gun to secure the component to the board. After I have placed the IC on the board, I will apply pressure with my tweezers to hold it in place and then run some solder flux over the legs. Then I will add a little bit of solder onto my iron and then run the iron over the legs to solder this side. Be sure there are no solder bridges between the legs. In this image, we show what a solder bridge looks like. Then repeat the same process on the other side of the IC. Next, I will clean up the component using my brush and rubbing alcohol. Then I will put this satellite board back into place on the top side of the power supply. Flip the board over and solder it into place. After you have the satellite board in place, you can flip the power supply over and then solder the bottom side. If you have any bad solder joints, you can use the solder wick to clean up the area and then resolder it. I will use my brush and rubbing alcohol to clean my solder joints on the board. I will repeat the same process with the other satellite board as well. The power supply is now ready to be reinstalled back into your TV. Thank you for watching one of our many tutorials here at ShopJimmy.com. If you have any further questions regarding your repair, simply post a question in the comment section below. We strive to learn and share new TV repair tips every day. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and grow with us. Share our videos with your friends to help us spread the savings, and don't forget to hit that like button.